You're not weak because you feel anger. You're not undisciplined because emotion shows up. But you do lose your power the moment you react without reflection. That's where so many of us fail, not in feeling too much, but in acting too soon. The Stoic doesn't try to suppress what rises. He doesn't shame himself for being human, but he trains for the space between the feeling and the response. Because that space, that's where all the power lives. That's where your life changes. In a pause, a breath, a moment of restraint that rewrites everything that might have gone wrong. Most people live in reaction. They let their first emotion become their first move. But that's not wisdom. That's not strength. That's programming. And you weren't born to be a slave to your impulses. You were born to train them, to pause long enough to see clearly, to respond, not explode, to speak truth, not tension, and to make choices that reflect who you want to be, not just how you feel right now. In this episode, we'll explore the hidden power of the pause, why it's not a sign of weakness, but a weapon of wisdom. You'll learn how to train this space between stimulus and response, and why, in a reactive world, your stillness becomes your greatest advantage. The pause is where wisdom lives. It's not in the moment you feel anger that your character is tested. It's in the moment right after, that thin sliver of time between the spark of emotion and your reaction. That's where your power lives. That's where wisdom either enters or escapes. And it's in that space, that sacred pause, where the Stoic builds his freedom. Because the one who can pause, even for a breath, is the one who controls not just the situation, but himself. Most people move so fast, they never realize they have a choice. The insult comes, and the words fire back. The frustration rises, and the door slams. The disappointment hits, and the blame gets thrown. But a life lived like that, in automatic mode, is a life ruled by impulse, not intention. The Stoic refuses that. He knows that the quality of his life is shaped by the quality of his responses, and every response begins in the space he chooses to create. The pause is not about inaction, it's about conscious action. It's not hesitation rooted in fear, it's stillness rooted in clarity. It's that brief window where you ask, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? And what would the best version of me choose to do right now? That kind of thinking doesn't come in the rush. It comes in the pause. And the more you practice it, the more you strengthen the reflex of wisdom. Think of someone you admire, someone calm under fire, composed under pressure. They're not cold or disconnected. They've simply learned to build a gap between what they feel and what they do. That gap, that's discipline. That's self-respect. That's the product of inner training, not reacting like everyone else, but responding like someone who's done the inner work. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are disturbed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." That's the essence of the pause. The ability to challenge your first estimate, to not take your first thought as truth, to delay the emotion just long enough to see through it. And maybe, in that pause, you realize you don't need to reply, you don't need to lash out, you don't need to protect your ego, because your peace matters more than your pride. Pausing doesn't mean avoiding, it means taking ownership. It means facing your emotions with maturity instead of letting them control your behavior. It's the moment where you break the cycle, where you say, "No, I won't let this define me. I'll define how I meet it." That's power. Quiet, grounded, sustainable power. And this isn't just a philosophical idea, it's practical. In your next conversation, in your next challenge, in your next moment of tension, train the pause. Even 2 seconds of silence can prevent 2 hours of regret. Even a breath can stop a spiral. Even a moment of reflection can change the next 10 years. Because once you realize you don't have to act immediately, you begin to act intentionally. The pause is the beginning of mastery. It's not something you wait for, it's something you practice. And every time you do, you build a new muscle, the muscle of self-direction, of clarity, of presence. And that's what Stoicism is all about, owning your response, moment by moment, until your life is no longer run by emotion, but guided by reason and wisdom. Reactivity is a weakness. We're often taught to be quick to reply, quick to defend, quick to fight back. In a world that idolizes speed, silence can look like weakness, but the truth is the opposite. It's reactivity that reveals the weakness. The person who reacts to every opinion, every insult, every shift in mood isn't strong. They're ruled, controlled, tugged around by whatever life throws their way. And that's not power. That's instability dressed up as urgency. The Stoic knows that strength isn't in the reaction, it's in the restraint. He understands that if someone else can push a button in you and get a guaranteed reaction every time, then you're not free. You're owned. Your emotions, your peace, your behavior, they're all at the mercy of someone else's choices. And the one who angers you controls you. That's why reactivity must be trained out, not tolerated. Reactivity feels good in the moment. That sharp comeback, that impulsive decision, that dramatic walkout. It gives a short-term hit of control, but what it takes in return is far greater. Your clarity, your relationships, your peace of mind. How many regrets in your life started with a reaction? How many moments did you wish you could take back? Not because of what was said to you, but because of what you did without thinking. Seneca warned, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay. Not denial, but delay. A space long enough for reason to enter. Because once reason shows up, emotion loses its grip. You remember who you are. You remember what matters. And most importantly, you remember that you have a choice. You are not a machine. You don't need to act on every feeling. You can acknowledge the fire without feeding it. And here's where reactivity hides, not just in obvious anger, but in sarcasm, in passive aggression, in the quiet withdrawal when you feel offended. The Stoic doesn't just train the big explosions. He trains the subtle escapes too. He trains for steadiness in the small moments. He practices staying still when something stings, not to suppress, but to stay sovereign, because only the calm mind sees clearly, only the steady heart chooses wisely. Reactivity often comes from unprocessed pain, from insecurity, from needing to defend an identity that feels fragile. But once you start doing the inner work, once you start anchoring in your values, not your feelings, you don't need to react to everything. You become less defensive, more deliberate, less provoked, more composed. You become someone whose presence de-escalates situations, not inflames them. And this kind of strength is rare, because it takes daily work. It takes letting go of the need to win arguments, the need to be right, the need to get the last word. It means choosing long-term peace over short-term ego. That's the discipline. That's the real test. So the next time you feel triggered, pause. Not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to resist the pull. Ask yourself, who am I giving control to in this moment? If the answer isn't you, then step back, breathe, choose again. Because the reaction may feel justified, but that doesn't make it wise. Don't confuse emotional speed with strength. True power is the ability to stay still when everything in you wants to move, to stay quiet when everything in you wants to speak, to stand firm when everything in you wants to attack. That's the kind of control the Stoic trains for, and that's the kind of control that can change a life. Time clarifies emotion. In the heat of the moment, every feeling seems absolute. The anger feels righteous, the offense feels personal, the disappointment feels like a verdict. But if you give those emotions space, if you give them time, something powerful happens. They soften, they change, they reveal their real shape, because emotion in its rawest form is rarely accurate. It's a signal, yes, but not a sentence. It needs time to settle before it can speak the truth. How often have you said something you regretted just minutes later? How often has a situation felt like a disaster, only to look trivial by the next morning? That's the power of time. It doesn't erase what's real, but it filters what's false. And if you learn to wait, not forever, just long enough, you'll see what's beneath the emotion. You'll see the unmet need, the hidden fear, the story you were telling yourself that may not have been entirely true. The Stoics understood this well. That's why they trained themselves not to trust the first wave. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That includes power over the timeline of your reaction. You don't owe anyone an immediate reply. You don't owe your emotions the stage the moment they arrive. You owe yourself clarity, and clarity needs time. The moment you feel something strong, anger, sadness, betrayal, ask yourself, would I still feel this tomorrow? If the answer is no, pause, sit with it. Don't suppress it, explore it. Let it breathe. Because when you allow emotion to settle, it begins to speak more honestly. And more often than not, it will tell you, this wasn't about them. This was about you. That's the gift of time. It shows you what's yours to own. This is especially crucial in relationships. A harsh word said in emotion can create wounds that take years to heal. A rash decision made in frustration can destroy something built over months. But time gives you the chance to respond in a way that reflects your values, not just your mood. It gives you the opportunity to choose integrity over impulse, grace over reaction, wisdom over ego. And this isn't just about personal peace, it's about long-term growth. Because every time you delay an impulsive reaction, you're rewiring your brain. You're training emotional patience. You're strengthening that gap between emotion and behavior. And with enough repetition, that gap becomes your power. It becomes your default. And eventually, you're no longer someone who explodes. You're someone who observes first. Time is not a luxury. It's a discipline, a weapon, a spiritual filter that reveals what really matters. The Stoic knows that if a feeling is real and important, it will still be there after the fire dies down. And if it was just noise, it will fade. Either way, you've won, because you chose not to be ruled by the moment, but to rise above it. So give your feelings space, let the wave rise, and let it pass. Because if you can wait just a little longer, you'll often find that what you really need to say is something entirely different. And that difference, that's what separates those who live in reaction from those who lead with wisdom. Breathe before you speak. There's a moment, often so small it goes unnoticed, between the surge of emotion and the choice of words. It's the moment most people skip. The breath they never take, the silence they never allow. But that breath, it's everything. It's the difference between escalation and understanding, between regret and restraint. To breathe before you speak is not a delay. It's a decision to lead with presence, not pressure. to engage with intention, not instinct. Breathing doesn't just calm the body, it resets the mind. It tells the nervous system, I'm safe, I'm not in danger, I can choose instead of react. And in that calm, you become capable of something most people miss entirely. Listening. Listening not just to others, but to yourself, to your values, to your vision of the person you want to be in this moment. A deep breath is not about stalling, it's about remembering who you are, what matters, and how you want to show up. The Stoics practiced this mental reset constantly. Epictetus taught that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. But listening requires stillness. It requires that breath, that space, before words take flight. Without it, your words are shaped by tension, not clarity. And no matter how right you are, if the tone is wrong, the truth gets lost. Have you ever watched someone ruin a point they were absolutely correct about, just because of how they delivered it? That's what happens when you skip the breath, when you let emotion hijack expression. But when you breathe, even just for 2 seconds, you lower the fire. You quiet the noise. And what comes out next has a chance of being something useful, not just reactive. This is especially vital in conflict. When emotions run high and your voice wants to rise with them, take a breath. Not to suppress, but to anchor. Ask yourself, is what I'm about to say necessary? Is it kind? Is it useful? And maybe most importantly, will this move the moment forward or just prove I'm upset? That pause, that breath, is where communication transforms from reactive noise into constructive dialogue. Even in everyday moments, in meetings, in relationships, in moments of disagreement, this habit of breathing before speaking builds trust. People begin to feel that when you speak, you've thought, you've considered, you've tempered emotion with wisdom. And in a world of impulsive replies, that kind of presence commands quiet respect. But this takes practice, because your instinct will always want to speak now, especially when you feel hurt, or misunderstood, or impatient. That's when the breath becomes the most powerful, because it's not just a breath, it's a boundary, a self-imposed line between feeling and expression. And every time you respect that line, you train yourself to lead your emotions, not be led by them. So next time you feel that urge to snap, to cut, to prove, or to speak, just to release, breathe. Let that breath remind you that you are not your reaction, that you have more strength in silence than you do in shouting, that your words have power, and power must be handled with care. Speak only after you've paused, and let that pause become the signature of someone who no longer reacts from habit, but responds from mastery. Space allows for reflection. There's a strange discomfort in silence, a moment without noise, without reaction, without immediate response. It feels like something is missing, but that emptiness isn't a void, it's an invitation to reflect, to notice, to understand, and in that space, something sacred happens. The truth begins to surface. Not the truth shouted in anger, not the truth twisted by ego, but the quiet kind, the kind that only shows up when everything else gets still. The Stoic doesn't fear space. He creates it. He understands that wisdom doesn't scream over the noise, it arrives after it. Reflection can't live in the middle of chaos. It needs space. And in that space, you begin to see things differently. You start to realize that the situation wasn't as urgent as it felt, that your interpretation may have been tinted by insecurity or fatigue, that maybe the words that stung you weren't meant to wound, but to mirror something unhealed. Space isn't about withdrawing from life. It's about stepping back far enough to see it clearly, just like a painter steps away from the canvas to understand what's really there. Up close, everything feels distorted. But with distance, patterns emerge. Emotions begin to make sense, and you start to notice what your reactivity never let you see. Reflection is not passive, it's active awareness. It's asking, what just happened? Why did I feel that way? What story did I instantly tell myself? That kind of questioning can't happen in the heat of the moment. It needs air. It needs silence. It needs the kind of space that most people avoid, because sitting with yourself is harder than reacting at someone else. And yet, this is where maturity lives, in the uncomfortable space where you're not distracting yourself or blaming others, but looking inward with courage. The Stoic isn't afraid of that inner confrontation. He welcomes it, because he knows that the person who can reflect deeply can choose wisely, and every wise choice builds a life of fewer regrets, deeper peace, and stronger relationships. This kind of inner space also creates empathy, because in reflection you begin to see not just your own pain, but theirs. You begin to realize that maybe the harsh comment wasn't about you. Maybe they were speaking from their own fear, their own stress, their own unprocessed frustration. And from that clarity, you don't have to excuse their behavior, but you can choose a better response. One not rooted in ego, but in understanding. But this practice takes intention. In a world that's always rushing, always scrolling, always reacting, you have to choose to create that space. That may mean walking away from a conversation before replying, journaling before deciding, sitting in nature with your phone off. It may look like doing nothing, but in truth, you're doing everything. You're giving your mind the oxygen it needs to breathe and to think, to see. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality. That's because we rarely pause long enough to separate the two. But in reflection, imagination slows, reality sharpens, and you begin to respond not from fear or assumption, but from grounded clarity. So honor the space. Don't fill every silence with noise. Don't rush to fill the gaps with half-formed reactions. Let there be distance between what happened and how you respond. Because in that space, you will meet a version of yourself you can actually trust. The version that sees, understands, and acts from wisdom, not impulse. Stillness creates better choices. In a reactive mind, choices shrink. Everything feels urgent. Everything feels personal. Everything feels like it demands immediate action. But in stillness, real stillness, the opposite happens. Your choices expand. The noise fades. Options appear. You start to notice not just what you can do, but what you should do. And that difference between reaction and response is the gap where character is built. Most people rush into decisions not because they know what they're doing, but because they're uncomfortable with not knowing. They fear the pause. They fear stillness. They fear appearing slow, indecisive, uncertain. But a Stoic understands that speed doesn't equal wisdom. Stillness, even when it's just a moment, gives the mind space to return to itself, to detach from emotion, to reconnect with values, to remember what truly matters. It's in this space that we can see the whole picture. When something goes wrong, your instincts might scream, "Fix it now," say something, do something. But stillness asks, is this the right thing to say? Is this the right time to act? Is my motivation clear, or is it just ego trying to survive? These questions don't come in chaos. They come in calm. And if you never train calm, you'll always be a slave to urgency. Think of stillness like the surface of a lake. When the waters are stirred, The reflection is distorted. You can't see what's real. But when the surface settles, truth appears. You can look into the water and see yourself. That's what happens when the mind stops thrashing around in reaction and starts holding steady. You begin to see, not just feel. You begin to choose, not just react. And better choices aren't just more peaceful, they're more powerful. They lead to better conversations, stronger relationships, fewer regrets. They keep you from burning bridges, saying what can't be unsaid, doing what can't be undone. In stillness, you choose based on principle, not pressure. You speak from intention, not irritation. You act with clarity, not confusion. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." That retreat, that stillness, is not some mystical practice. It's a decision, a pause before a reply, a walk before a confrontation, a breath before an argument. It's the discipline of holding back, not to avoid life, but to enter it more skillfully. And stillness doesn't mean passivity. It means preparation. It means letting your emotions settle so your actions come from truth, not tension. It means refusing to let other people's chaos become your state of mind. It means creating a calm core that isn't shaken by every storm. And from that center, choosing powerfully. This is hard, especially in a culture that demands instant replies, instant decisions, instant everything. But the cost of speed is often depth, and the one who is always rushing rarely makes wise moves, just fast ones. The Stoic understands the most powerful move is not always the fastest. Sometimes it's the one that waits, the one that listens, the one that breathes, the one that pauses long enough to make a decision that reflects wisdom, not insecurity. So, train stillness. Don't just wait for it, create it. In your conversations, in your mornings, in your reactions. Choose to sit with discomfort until clarity rises. Because the best choices aren't forced, they're discovered. And only stillness gives you the vision to find them. Pause is power in motion. It may seem like a contradiction. How can a pause, something so still, so quiet, be a form of motion? But that's exactly the kind of paradox the Stoic trains for. The moment you pause, you're not stopping the movement of life. You are redirecting it. You are reclaiming the wheel from your emotions, your ego, your old conditioning. And in that redirection, you regain your authority. You make a conscious move, not just a fast one. You replace force with flow. The world will tell you that movement is always better, that doing something, anything, is superior to sitting still. But movement without direction is just noise. It's the kind of frantic energy that makes people look busy without getting anywhere meaningful. A pause, on the other hand, is deeply intentional. It's the space where you decide, what kind of motion do I actually want to create? Because not every response builds. Some destroy. And not every word heals. Some scar. This is why the Stoic doesn't equate action with progress. He knows the strongest moves begin not in impulse, but in clarity. That clarity is found in the pause, not the pressure. When you pause, you access your deeper self. The part of you that's not swayed by emotion, that's not reacting from insecurity, that's not performing to impress. You meet the calm version of you, the grounded version, the one that's capable of choosing power over panic. Think about a skilled martial artist. They don't swing wildly. Their greatest strength lies in stillness, in anticipation, in knowing exactly when to strike and when to wait. Their pause is not hesitation. It's mastery. The same applies to life. Your pause, your stillness, is not a sign of fear. It's a sign of focus. It's the discipline of someone who doesn't waste energy proving anything. They choose their moment, and when they move, it counts. Seneca wrote, "No person has the power to have everything they want, but it is in their power not to want what they don't have, and to cheerfully put to good use what they do have." That kind of perspective, that inner adjustment, happens in the pause, not when you're scrambling to get more, but when you're still enough to appreciate what already exists. That pause is power, because it realigns your perception before you act. This principle applies to everything: your speech, your decisions, your relationships. When someone criticizes you, the automatic reaction might be defensiveness. But pause, breathe, ask, is there truth here? If yes, grow from it. If no, let it pass. That's power. When life throws uncertainty your way and you feel the urge to react, pause. Ask, what's the most skillful response I can offer right now? That's power. When you're tempted to judge, to complain, to lash out, to post something you'll regret, pause. Return to your center. That's power. And the beauty of this practice is that it compounds. The more you choose to pause, the more it becomes your nature. And over time, you become someone whose presence alone carries weight. Not because you speak loudly, but because when you do speak, it's from a place of control, not chaos. You stop being emotionally expensive. You stop making problems worse. You stop giving away your peace in exchange for being right. The pause is not passivity. It is movement inward before motion outward. It is wisdom in action. And the more you train it, the more powerful you become, not in domination over others, but in dominion over yourself. Don't rush clarity. In moments of pressure, there's a strong impulse to force resolution, to fix it, to say something, to decide now. But wisdom doesn't rush. Clarity, like water, takes time to settle. Stir it, and everything becomes cloudy. Leave it still, and the truth rises to the surface on its own. That's why the Stoic doesn't panic when the path ahead looks blurry. He waits. He knows that clear thinking can't be forced. It has to be invited. And that invitation is written in patience. Most people confuse movement with progress because sitting in uncertainty is uncomfortable. They'd rather act with confusion than wait with intention. But when you rush clarity, you end up acting from anxiety. You reach for easy answers that feel good now but cost you later. And deep down, you know this. You've made decisions before just to escape the tension, and later wished you had waited just a little longer. When you don't yet know what to say, be quiet. When you don't yet know what to do, be still. When emotion clouds your lens, don't wipe it in frustration. Let the fog lift on its own. This isn't about indecision, it's about integrity. Because true clarity doesn't just help you act, it helps you act in alignment. And when your action is aligned with your values, your vision, and your truth, that's when it becomes powerful. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, if someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth. But how can you recognize truth if you don't pause long enough to see it? How can you receive correction, new insight, or inner guidance if your mind is racing toward the next thing? Clarity can't catch up to you if you're always sprinting ahead of it. Sometimes you have to slow down, or even stop, to let it find you. There's also a kind of trust that's built in this waiting, a trust in yourself, in life, in the process. And trust is what allows you to sit with not knowing, without panicking, because clarity is not always intellectual. Sometimes it's emotional, sometimes it's intuitive, and it only becomes available when you quiet the noise long enough to feel it. The Stoic's power is in his patience. He knows that storms pass, that what feels urgent now may look different in an hour, that sleep, silence, or a walk may reveal more wisdom than any frantic discussion. And when he acts, he does so from a place of centered strength, not emotional pressure. That kind of calm cannot be faked. It comes only from training, from resisting the urge to do something for the sake of doing, from developing the muscle of discernment. In your relationships, this matters. In your work, this matters. In your own inner life, this matters. You don't have to react just because something happened. You don't have to decide just because a decision is expected. You don't have to speak just because there's silence. You can pause. You can breathe. You can say, "Not yet." And in that space, you give yourself the room to rise above the emotional fog and move from wisdom. So next time you're tempted to push your way to clarity, stop. Let clarity come to you. Sit, reflect, wait, and trust that the mind, when given space, will do what it was designed to do, find truth. And when that truth arrives, you'll recognize it, not because you chased it down, but because you made room for it to appear. A pause can prevent regret. Regret is often not born from what we felt, but from what we did with what we felt. A single moment of reactivity can burn bridges that took years to build. One sentence spoken in anger can echo in someone's mind forever. One impulsive choice made under pressure can alter the entire trajectory of your life. And when the dust settles, when the moment has passed, all you're left with is this heavy thought: I wish I had paused. That pause, it doesn't erase emotion, it gives it space to evolve. It doesn't mean you won't respond, it means your response won't be something you carry as shame. Because here's the truth, most of our regrets don't come from silence. They come from noise. From the things we said too quickly, from the actions we didn't think through, from the words we can't take back, and the damage we didn't mean to cause. The Stoics knew that restraint isn't weakness, it's foresight. It's recognizing that the future version of you, the one who has to live with the consequences, will thank you for not acting in haste. The pause is not just for now, it's for the next day. For the version of you who wants peace, not guilt. For the version of you who chooses legacy over ego, who chooses long-term strength over short-term satisfaction. Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. But what if you don't react at all, at least not right away? What if you let the initial wave crash without trying to ride it? What if you held your tongue, not out of fear, but out of discipline? That's the kind of power that prevents damage. That's the kind of awareness that writes a better story, one you're proud to tell. Sometimes all it takes is 5 seconds. 5 seconds between the thought and the action. 5 seconds to ask yourself, will I regret this tomorrow? And if the answer is maybe, you already have your answer. That pause becomes your protection. It becomes the invisible shield that stops a bad moment from becoming a bad memory. In relationships, this matters deeply. Think of all the moments where a fight didn't need to happen, where walking away, taking a breath, choosing silence, even briefly, could have softened everything. The more we react, the more we create wounds. The more we pause, the more we protect peace. Not just ours, but theirs too. But here's the deeper truth. Pausing doesn't just prevent regret. It builds character. Because every time you choose not to lash out, not to fire back, not to act just because you feel something intensely, you become stronger, more in control, more centered. And that's a strength no one can give you. You earn it through practice, through restraint, through the discipline of saying, "Not yet. Let me sit with this first." So when emotion rises, when the urge to speak is strong, when you feel the pull to act on your pain, pause. Not because silence is always right, but because regret is heavy and peace is light. And in that tiny space between impulse and integrity, you get to choose who you are. Train the reflex of restraint. You don't rise to the level of your intentions. You fall to the level of your training, and if you haven't trained restraint, then in moments of stress, frustration, or conflict, you will fall. The Stoic doesn't wait until life tests him to start building control. He practices it daily, not because it's easy, but because he knows that one powerful reflex, restraint, can protect everything he values. Most people think of restraint as holding back, but in truth, it's a form of intelligent control. It's not the absence of power, it's power refined. It's a muscle, and like any muscle, it only strengthens with repetition. Every time you resist the urge to respond emotionally, every time you pause before reacting, every time you choose reflection over explosion, you are training yourself to be stronger under pressure. And that strength? It makes you unshakable. Restraint doesn't mean weakness. It doesn't mean silence forever. It means you wait until the emotion has passed, until your clarity returns, until your response reflects your values, not your volatility. It's the difference between reacting from pain and responding from principle, between fueling chaos and creating calm. And in that difference lies everything: your peace, your dignity, your long-term influence. Think of the greatest leaders, thinkers, and teachers. Their presence didn't come from shouting louder. It came from restraint, from being measured, from knowing when to speak and when to wait. Their power wasn't in how fast they acted, but in how thoughtfully they did. That kind of control is magnetic. It commands respect. It makes people listen. Because behind every word, there's weight, and behind every silence, there's wisdom. Marcus Aurelius, in his moments of greatest turmoil, didn't reach for revenge. He reached inward. He trained himself to remain still when everything outside demanded motion. That's restraint. That's power. Not to suppress what you feel, but to rise above it. Not to ignore injustice, but to respond in a way that actually creates change, instead of adding more fire to the flame. You can start small, in conversations, in daily frustrations, when you're cut off in traffic, when someone talks over you, when you feel that familiar surge of irritation. Instead of reacting, train yourself to observe, to breathe, to wait, not forever, just long enough to regain control, long enough to ask, what outcome do I want from this? What would the highest version of me do right now? That's where the transformation begins, not in grand gestures, but in tiny moments of discipline. The world doesn't need more reaction. It needs more clarity. It needs more people who don't let the mood of the moment decide the direction of their life. When you train restraint, you don't just change how you act. You change who you become. You become someone who isn't easily provoked, easily broken, or easily manipulated. You become someone whose peace is real, because it's earned. So make restraint your reflex, not just something you remember when things go wrong, but something you embody daily. And when the hard moments come, as they always do, you won't have to try to be calm. You'll already be there. Not because the storm is over, but because you've become the kind of person who no longer drowns in waves. You rise above them with silence, strength, and self-command. In a world that celebrates the loud, the fast, and the immediate, Choosing to pause is an act of rebellion, choosing silence when others shout, choosing stillness when your emotions scream for movement, choosing to hold your ground not with force but with focus. That's not weakness, that's mastery. The Stoic doesn't numb his feelings, he refines them. He doesn't deny emotion, he disciplines its expression, and in doing so, he gains something far more valuable than the last word, the upper hand, or a temporary relief. He gains self-respect. He gains peace. He gains a life lived with intention, not reaction. Every pause is a step toward the person you're trying to become. Every moment of restraint is an act of freedom, and every time you choose not to be pulled into the chaos of the moment, you become a little less controlled by the world, and a little more in command of yourself. So don't underestimate the pause. Practice it, strengthen it, make it part of who you are. Because when you learn to pause, you don't just avoid regret, you build a life that feels aligned, deliberate, and grounded in something unshakable. Speak less, reflect more, and let your calm become your power.